Okay, so just so you know, this is being recorded and it will be shared afterwards. There were 1,300 people that signed up, so it's quite popular. And that means a lot of people will be watching the video afterwards, even if they're not here tonight. So on that note, I just want to suggest that if you have questions for John, that we please put them into the chat, and John and I will keep an eye on the chat. And I'll present the questions or maybe a couple questions to him afterwards, just to protect people's anonymity. And our children's anonymity. So other than that, that's the main order of business. So I think I'd like to turn you over to Mr. John Sharry. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Great, and thank you very much for inviting me, Michelle, and I'm delighted to be here supporting the work in Neurodiversity Ireland. If I just introduce myself, so I'm a social worker, psychotherapist, and also a adjunct professor of psychology in UCD. But I've been working with families for over 30 years. I've been working with families whose children might be ADHD and autistic all that time for over 30 years. And I've always been, when I first met autistic and ADHD children, I always was very, in the old days, very hesitant about the negative labels that were attached to them and even the pathological diagnosis and the implications of that for children. And I was working in the psychiatric system, so I was the voice, again, to looking at children's strengths. And in fact, what I wrote my master's on 30 years ago was a strengths-based approach to working with families with autistic children. So in recent times, I've been absolutely thrilled to see the much broader appreciation of autism and ADHD as a brain difference that comes with as many strengths as challenges, and not a pathological condition to be eliminated in any way, but more just a natural variation and difference that is really important to appreciate and enjoy in your children. And indeed, many of the challenges that we experience, if you're ADHD or autistic, or your children experience ADHD, are caused by society not accommodating children's differences and even adults' differences. So that's a very important point to make at the beginning. So I'm delighted to be here talking about this very important topic and approaching from a strengths-based approach. So I'm going to be talking about burnout and looking after reducing stress and looking after parents and children. This is a very important topic. It's the number one thing. That's why I'm not surprised so many people have signed up. When I meet parents, and I've worked with tens of thousands of parents over 30 years, the number one thing I always am inviting them to do is look after themselves. They come to me stressed and burnt out, worried about their children, and they can do nothing for their children when they're stressed and burnt out. And I'm inviting them, let's first look after you, discover how we can help you feel calm, in perspective, and then we can also look after your child and help them be calm, in perspective, and less stressed. So that's why I rolled both into one, looking at stress and burnout for children and for parents simultaneously. So I'll give you, I'm going to speak for hopefully about 40 minutes. That's my plan. And then we'll take some, I'm open to some questions. I'll be very interested in your questions and your thoughts. And Michelle will help me with those as well. I'll do a little interactive exercise near the end as well in the chat. So let me jump in then to my content here. I'm going to work through some overheads. So let's get started here. Let's go to the beginning here. Get started. So managing stress and burnout in families. What is stress? Let's look at that. Let's start with a definition. And stress is really any activation of your nervous system. It's about, you need a bit of stress to get going. These can be very mild things, just getting up out of bed. You need some stress and activation of your nervous system. It's very important to say that stress is not a bad thing per se, and a little bit of stress is a good thing. You can't do anything unless you have some activation of your nervous system, unless you feel a little bit stressed. You can't achieve anything, you can't get anything done. And in fact, It's a much worse problem to have no stress at all. People can be sort of hypo or completely unable to activate their nervous system and move to do anything. So a little bit of stress is a good thing. And this graph is quite a good, shows that actually to perform and get things done, you need a bit of stress, and then a little bit more stress that pushes you to higher performance. There's a peak of that and then suddenly your performance diminishes because you're under too much stress. So if we take, say, something like you're thinking of even meeting somebody socially, that should often, maybe it's a newish person, that might provoke a little bit of stress because you're thinking, will this meeting go well? What will I say? And that little bit of stress might make you prepare, rehearse, get ready, and give the meeting, the social meeting, the attention it deserves, and the person you're meeting the attention they deserve. But then if you constantly worry about it, if you're panicking about meeting, then you go over the side of the curve, and it becomes a problem. You're stressed because then you can't. You might overthink what you're going to say. You might freeze in conversation. You might know what to say. And in fact, if it goes down really low, you might avoid going at all. You might be so overwhelmed by stress that you avoid the meeting in the first place. So stress, a little bit is good. There's a sweet spot of the right amount of stress, and then it becomes a bad thing, and it depletes and it winds you down. But that's very important to understand. So a lot of what good self-management is, and helping your children manage, is getting the right level of stress and knowing how children get stressed, how you get stressed, and how you relax and deregulate and reduce your stress. I'll come back to this curve in a minute, but let me want to introduce another concept, because I want to talk about stress and neurodiversity. Because it's very, very clear from all the evidence that neurodivergent children, neurodistinct children, as I like to call them now, experience higher levels of stress and burnout, higher rates of mental health problems, higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, higher rates, unfortunately, of suicide when older. So huge amount of stress is attached to being neurodivergent. Why is this? Why is this? It's worth really thinking about this very, very carefully. And it's a number of different factors that we have to bear in mind, understand. Neurodivergent and neurodistinct children have different sort of sensory system, which means they experience the world differently and in a way that's not appreciated. For example, you quite often might be taking your child to school and then they suddenly lie down and start screaming on the floor as you approach the school. You think, what's going on? What's the matter with them? And actually, if you don't know, but if you get inside their nervous system, what's going on for them, they're overwhelmed by the sensory experience of all the noise, of all these children approaching, the screaming. They hear the screaming at a higher definition, a higher set of decibels than you do. They can't filter it out. They can't understand with people bumping into them is very stressful, for example. So it's a completely different experience they're having, a very stressful experience that might be misunderstood. So this is a very, very common experience. So children have this higher levels of stress due to sensory differences as they're going through the world. Let's look at some other. You might also have interoception challenges. Let me explain that. A very common difference for neurodivergent, neurodistinct children is that they experience their body differently. They're sometimes out of touch with their body, so quite often they don't know that they're hungry, know that they're getting tired or fatigued, or even not notice pain. They might be tuned out. It's a little bit of a nervous system difference. So that means they don't know when to take a break. They don't know when to have something to eat. So they might push themselves through things that they shouldn't be doing. If they're listening to their body, they say, "Ooh, that's too much for me. Ooh, I need to take a break." So they're often, that system is not working. So thereby they can put themselves into much more stressful situations. School, all children have to go to school, or do they? But the school, the way it's all set up, is set up for quite a neurotypical learning experience, which may not suit your child, may not meet their needs. So lots and lots of neurodivergent children experience school is very stressful. I was just working with a mother there recently, and she talked about when she'd drop her teenage daughter off to school, who was autistic, she would be suddenly in the car, get this massive stress. She was gearing herself up for a really stressful experience going to school because of all the social expectations, who she's going to talk to, how she'd manage the classrooms. She would just all be ruminating, and she'd sort of be white knuckle it going through school. She'd be going to school like this, managing, trying to get through. And then when she'd come home, she'd sort of collapse and be tired and wrecked by the whole experience. And And for that mom understanding that the school was so stressful for a whole variety of reasons, social complex reasons and social reasons, that was mean that she was experiencing a much higher level of stress because of school and needed a whole different response. Equally, you could have an ADHD child who goes to school, and because of their interest-based nervous system, they're only interested, they can only attend to something that fascinates them or interests them, and school curriculum is dead boring, let's face it. So they experience this crushing boredom in school and an inability to attend to what's going on in the curricula and feel missed out. And then they think, what's wrong with me? And actually, boredom not attending is incredibly stressful, because if you don't attend, then if you distracted, you can get in trouble and so forth. So school is often a very stressful place for neurodivergent, neurodistinct children, just to put that in context. So you also then have masking, where children try to fit in or adapt how they're behaving so they don't appear different. And masking is very stressful. So you might have a child who tries to learn how to fit in with the banter of the GAA soccer, or the soccer group, and all the conversation, they're missing it, and they're trying to mimic that, which is very stressful. Or an ADHD child might repress their wish to talk about a subject because they don't want to feel out of sync, and so forth. But this masking is quite a lot of self-management. It's all about management, and it's stressful. It perform, and that causes you then to be higher levels of stress, anxiety, worry, and so forth. And another thing that is being understood is actually the standard life transitions that we all go through, children all go through, such as starting school, starting primary school, starting secondary school, and going to college, are all more difficult for neurodistinct children, on average, are more difficult. They're much more likely to be stressed and have burnout at these key transition times. And it's very important that you anticipate that. So when a big time for children, neurodistinct children, to come to see me, or when we were in the clinic, or be referred, was starting school, because they would be finding it hard to cope in the classroom, would appear to have behavior problems, and they might get labeled for that, but actually they were just having a difficult time with the transition into the school environment. Into secondary school, at that peak difficult time of adolescence and 13, 14, trying to work out relationships and identity, that's harder often because of the neurotypical norms in schools for children who are neurodistinct, and then starting college. Now, there's a lot you can do about that. You can appreciate and anticipate that might be hard, and plan for that. One of the big things I'm very interested in doing when I see children struggling in school, quite often, and they don't want to go to school as a result, quite often there's a big pressure to get them into school. They must go to school. They must fit in, and so forth. Where sometimes, and if you keep pushing that, that might lead to burnout or increased stress, unless you address the situation going on in school and these situations, which you can do. But equally, you can get ahead of it. If you notice your child, but you can sort of take a mental health day. You can give them a break from the stressful environment. That mom, with dropping her teenager off into school, she was an older teenager, who was starting her senior cycle, so they would take a little planned break from school. She could learn much more at home herself, being honest, because who learns when you're stressed? Who learns when you're stressed? So they would plan little breaks, and they do that, and you can just tell the school, and this is what you're planning to do, because if a child was sick, a child can take time off, but you want to avoid them getting to the point of sickness and burnout. So I think this is a very important thing, because when I'm working with children who are out of school, there's a panic around all the services. They're panicking, parents are panicking. This is all putting extra stress on the child, increasing anxiety and depression. Whereas you might think, let's de-escalate, let's look at increasing breaks. Maybe they don't have to go back for the moment, 5 days. Maybe we're coming up to a break. Let's plan a period of recuperation, rebuilding. Let's look at alternatives. Let's address the problems in school. Let's put the onus. Let's look for accommodations. Let's reduce stress, and so forth. So life transitions can be more challenging, but anticipate that. Anticipate that is what I'm suggesting. Because when you look at the research, people need breaks from stressful situations, at least. So let's go down here. So ableism is another big source of stress for children, which is really about internalizing negative beliefs about self and what you can do. Let's talk about parenting and neurodiversity. parenting intrinsically is one of the most rewarding and the most stressful job you do. When they do the research about it, people say raising their children was the thing that gave them the most satisfaction in their whole life ever. That's the most common thing people will say. But they also say it was the most stressful thing they ever did as well. And when they do these studies of looking at like what's the most stressful job, and they maybe wire up people to monitors looking at their level of stress, and they might compare an air traffic controller about to go into it where a plane might be coming down, and they compare that to a parent managing a toddler meltdown or tantrum. Guess who's more stressed? Guess who's more stressed? You've got it. It's the parent with the toddler. So parenting is this inherently mixed job. I'm going to talk about how you manage parenting because of its mix of both challenge and reward and also stress. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But parenting a neurodistinct child brings extra challenges as well, as if you didn't need this. So because you have to support your child to deal with the extra challenges caused by society, caused by school, caused by their differences. They're going to get these extra challenges because of differences. You have to be there to be advocated, to be the supporter, to tune into them and sometimes parent them differently as a result. This might mean you have to parent differently to meet your child's needs. And that's stressful because you're trying to, you have all these expectations about what you should be doing, about what as a parent you should be doing and so forth. So like, for example, you might have the idea that, you might, all the parents in the school, you might have to get your child ready in the morning. You might let your child watch a screen while you dress them because they're so, the sensory experience of putting on clothes is tough for them and they don't like that. So watching a screen helps them distract and relax. Great tactic, why not? But then you feel this real guilt in telling other parents that because they have all these lovely, what they say, all these fantastic children just get, oh, my Johnny got dressed himself and he's only 4. He came down all dressed or whatever. So you feel bad by comparisons and expectations and so forth. And these make your job stressful when you can let them go, when you're parenting differently to meet your child's needs as they are. So let's go down and equally, if you are a neurodivergent parent, if you've neurodivergent and neurodistinct children, you're going to be much more likely to be neurodistinct yourself or your partner. Up to, I think, I've done surveys now with all the parents at my courses, and I saw another research study done as well, more sort of qualitative online, but up to 2/3 of parents who have a ADHD or autistic child are likely, one of them is likely to be, in 2/3 of cases, autistic ADHD themselves. So that would mean that you have preferred parenting styles and needs that may differ to neurotypical expectations. The way you parent or what you need as a parent might be different. For example, you might be an ADHD parent and you love adventure and spontaneity and taking the kids out for a spontaneous trip and disappearing off and breaking routines. Now, that may or may not suit your child, by the way, but that might be you notice that need in you. Or you might need an autistic, but you might need very clear routines and clarity about what's happening and rhythms in family life and so forth, and how things like that. So you need to tune into your own parenting style, and this can lead to stresses if you're not aware of them. And the other big thing about stress with parenting is it's difficult to take a break from parenting. You can't really. You're always doing it. It's 24/7. And it's not like when you're stressed in your job, they say, oh, well, go to your doctor and get a few weeks off. But you can't say, go to your doctor and get a few weeks off as parenting. Or certainly you don't want to get to a point where you have to do that. You want to intervene early. Because that's a lot of damage to your children. I used to work with parents who who we identified having mental health problems. So they might then actually experienced severe depression and anxiety, so much so that they were proposing for them to go into a psychiatric hospital, and to recuperate. But I would work really hard not to do that, that actually help them recuperate and recover in the home, because taking a severe break would be problematic both for the parent and the child. Now, sometimes that had to be done, and other parents and families can, of course, come around and look after in those situations. But the real thing is to try to learn how to take a break while parenting. Which we'll talk a little bit now as we go. So I wanted to introduce a a new concept of your energy reserve. And this is quite an important concept to think about, that as you have a limited source of energy as an individual, and a little bit like a battery, and you perform well when your battery is full or is not depleted, and you're always looking after your energy level. And what happens in burnout is you deplete your battery down to zero, and it's not full. So understanding your energy levels and how, like if I asked you to pause here, is how is my energy levels? How's my stress levels? What capacity have I got? This is a very important thing to be aware. So it's very important to know what depletes your energy levels and what replenishes your energy levels, and for your children. And these are very different for different people. But standard, like physical mental, will deplete your energy. Some tasks will deplete your energy. Maybe it's like doing chores or meeting certain people. You find yourself tired and exhausted. That took more energy than happened to me. Or you might say other tasks you do replenish your energy. So some tasks replenish, some deplete. So it's understanding which works for you. And the important thing is people are different. For example, for some people, watching a soccer match is really relaxing and energizing. For some, it's torture, boring, and miserable, and large difference between. So you have to understand and tune into what your energy and what charges and depletes. And the interesting thing is you sometimes get tasks with both deplete and replenish your energy at the same time. And there's a very interesting state called in psychology called a flow state. Is this where you engage in a challenging and meaningful activity that is stressful, demanding all your attention and focus, but it's really replenishing the tasks. You feel great doing it and you lose track of time, and replenishes more than it drains your energy level. So these are the things that often you experience when you're special interests and passions. So these are very important to know for your children, your neurodistinct children, because you understand when are they in these passions where they're being replenished in a meaningful, stressful but replenishing task. This is very, very important. We could spend a whole couple of talks on flow and passions and so forth. Let's return to this curve. I ask people when I show them this curve, where do you think is the most important place to be on the curve if you're doing doing a task? Where do you want to be in performance? Now, when I say that to most people, they always say at the top. They always say at peak. And it's actually not the case. The place you want to be is in this side here, is optimum, and that's where flow is. You're not using all your energy. You're at a sustainable rate. So if you use a running metaphor, you're lightly walking or jogging. You can keep going at this. You've got capacity. You're watching, enjoying. A peak state up the top is you're sprinting. You're running, using all your energy to perform, and you can only do it for a short period. It's a bit like Usain Bolt. He just does it for 9 seconds, not very much. And then he has to stop, he's exhausted. So it's understand that difference. You want to be mainly at optimum flow in your performance and energy. That's where you're best. Of course, we all know about the other states, overwhelm, when you start doing damage, you're being stressed, and then you reach breakdown and burnout at the other end. So understanding your performance and your energy is really, really important, and your children, because we want to avoid getting to this point of burnout where you've depleted your batteries, depleted your energy reserves, you've nothing left to give, and you reach breakdown. Now, it's very important to realize that burnout and stress aren't a single event. It's a bit like the camel there, the straw that broke the camel's back. It's a accumulation of stress. So you might have your child, they come in home after school and you ask them to put their coat away and they explode in a meltdown. Now, it's not because you put the demand of putting a coat away that caused that meltdown. It's the fact they were in school, stressed, managing social challenges, managing sensory difficulties, having a difficult day, worried about things, and they just come in and they just let loose because you are a safe person. So it's the straw that broke the camel. You got the camel collapsing, but it was on the way during the day. So understand this cumulative stress is very, very important. And here's the stages of burnout. Let's put on pre-burn. When you've no burnout, you're in balance. You're at stressful times, but you recover, and you're often in a state of flow and enjoyment in the day. That's the ideal state. You have this lovely balancing of stress, recovery, and your energy. Then you have the next state is increased stress. This is where you're depleting your battery. Your battery is being run down, and you're not recovering it. So you have to watch that. Sometimes that happens. You often need to take the battery out and get going and use your reserves for important things. But then sometimes you get chronic stress. This is where your battery's regularly depleted and you feel dissatisfied and fed up. That's how you know you're just not happy. Things you enjoy start becoming unenjoyable, and you start developing symptoms like anxiety, rumination, depression. You start having these meltdowns. You might even get to that point. So you're in this point of chronic stress, which is a very important. It's like you're driving a car and your little light comes on. You need to go to the fuel station. That's chronic. This is your final warning. It's your final warning in stress. And this happens with your children as well. And then you get burnout. Burnout, you're unable to function, you shut down, you might have a serious illness, you fatigue, you depression, and so forth. And you want to avoid at all costs getting to burnout for your children and yourself. So intervening early is the key, because burnout's harder to recover. It takes longer to recover. It's like bending a elastic band or bending a bow. You can recover from lots of strain, but once it breaks, you need a cast. You need a time of recuperation and recovery. So you want to intervene as early as possible. But understanding these states and noticing them in your children is really important. Noticing them in you is really important as well. And you've different needs and at different stages. Let's put all these up here. So in balance, it's all about maintaining health, prevention, avoiding getting into this point of high stress. And then increased stress, it's about noticing and taking action to reduce the stressful events that are happening and pulling back from, do I need to do that? Can I pull away from that? And then increasing your recovery, increasing the energy, the tasks that increase your energy and resources, that replenish you, that recharge you, and you recharge your child. And then in chronic stress, you usually need to make some more life changes. You need to alter, you need to change how you're doing. You can't just do work like that. You can't have school happening like that for your child. You can't have, you need to change something major in the life, and you need to support the symptoms that have occurred. There might be anxiety, depression, other things that are happening to help your child manage those extra symptoms that have started to emerge. And then burnout, you need a more major lifestyle and time off for the recovery period. I've got to talk about burnout in a minute, but let's look at what you can do. Let's look at some of the things that make a difference. You always want to intervene and prevent burnout at all costs. So you need to really look at recharging your battery. So the most important thing is to have a good understanding of what stresses you and your child. What are the stresses that really bother your child and deplete them? And what are the stresses that deplete you? As I said, different things for different people. For example, and you know what replenishes you and what your child. For example, you might have somebody who says, the thing that really replenishes me is going down, lying out in the sunshine, we ever have sunshine, by the pool, just sunbathing and relaxing, or by a beach, or going to the beach. Whereas for another person, your child maybe, that's the most horrific thing you could suggest, because they will be overwhelmed by the heat. They don't like the direct sunlight. They hate the sand on their feet. The thought of going to the water is a sensory nightmare for them. So your replenishing might contradict or not work with what your child. So building this map to understand yourself and your child and what stresses and what replenishes is your key step to understanding burnout and avoiding it. So let's have a look here. Changing expectations. This is an important one, because when I am talking to people, they often have these expectations which are causing their harm, what they're saying to themselves, what they hope they can do, and they're creating these unnecessary stresses, for example. So maybe I talked about the parent saying when the child comes home and they ask their child to put away their coat and leads to a meltdown. You might have in your head, it's really important that they tidy up after themselves, or they'll grow up to be whatever. You might have this very strong expectation around that. But actually, if you tune in, actually, your child is quite nearly burnt out at school, and what they need when they come in is the time of real relaxation. They can't manage even simple things. They're sort of collapsing a little bit, and I need to look after them and nurture them and let them be a little bit babied. In fact, let them regress a little bit. And that's a better expectation to have. That'll be much more nurturing and help manage your child managing these stresses out there. You can teach them to put up their coat another time down the road, because they're in the stage of high stress. You need to do that. example, you might think, a child, should I keep pushing them into an activity like a team sport that they're not enjoying, but you have an idea they need to be doing this, they need to be socializing. Maybe you don't. Maybe there's other things you need to find where they connect and enjoy and meet other people who are more like them. Like, for example, it's very interesting about expectations that lead to great stress. I remember this was a long time ago, I was working with a mother who was really stressed out, and she had, I think, two little preschool children, and she was so busy and stressed, and and I was trying to go through her day, like, can we create some windows in for her? And I discovered she had this expectation that she'd give her children a bath every night, okay? Because she had this idea this was from her own child and her own parent, and the children hated having a bath every night. But she said they have to be clean going to bed. And I said, do they? Like, in my own family, myself, I have a bath once a month. I'm a bit ashamed to say. But why was she had this expectation that was causing great stress, unnecessary? It wasn't like, in her memory, she thought this was meant to be a good thing. But it's a good thing if it's relaxing. For some families, the bath with preschool is a relaxing thing to do. Great, keep doing it. But this was creating great stress. So we were able to let the mum let that go, and therefore change her bedtime routine to something better for her. Another parent I was working with had the expectation that her child should do homework when they came home. And this was leading to big battles. This was a primary school age child. And that was causing great stress. There was a whole other issues why the child was struggling with homework, which they need to address and so forth, and in school. But just letting go the expectation of homework being done at home, just telling the teacher that teach them in school, and I'll look after fun at home. That's my job. And in fact, what we did with that parent was she had an after school the child went to for an hour before she collected him. And she let the after school manage the homework, or give him some time to do as much as he could. And then she wouldn't bring it up at home. She would just plan a fun thing to connect with her son. That worked much better. I supported her doing that. That was a much better parental expectation about things. So you need to examine your expectations that are causing stresses and burnout. Connect to passions, special interests, and similar people. This is what really helps your children. Finding passions, things they love, children they connect with who are like them. And I do a lot of workshops on that, and along with looking at how you can discover your child's passions and things they love. Sometimes their passions aren't the obvious ones, is the big thing. They don't, in school, the main passions in the neurotypical world that are pushed, what are the ones that everyone has to do, and you're somehow strange if you don't like them. You have to love GAA and soccer, and that's it. I remember I was working with a family from Tipperary, and it was like a bereavement in the family when he decided he didn't want to hurl or play hurling. So important was that that people would love that. Anyone from Tipperary here, maybe, and so forth. But you don't have to say that. That's not maybe not your child's thing, I'm afraid. There may be other things they need to do. Facilitate sensory experiences and stimming. So these are the really important parts of neurodistinct children. Like one child I know, our teenager, when he's really stressed, he goes home, puts on headphones, and rocks to music like that in his living room. Rocks to music like that. He's stimming. He needs to do that for about 20 minutes. Now, other parents might think, oh, we have to correct that behavior. Looks unusual, but actually, that's a sensory experience, and stim behavior really important to him. It's all fine. And is enormously important. Now, let's talk a little bit. We talked about preventing things, but let's talk about when you get to burnout. What do you do? Because preventing burnout and reducing stress is different than when you're there, unfortunately. So, some of you might have your children in burnout as we speak. They mightn't be able to do much, and they might need a period. Now, you might be approaching burnout or in burnout. So let's look. What can you do when you're there? And the first thing you have to do is plan a period of convalescence and recovery. It's like your bone is broken. It's like your ankle is broken. You can't still keep running. You have to put on a boot or a plaster of Paris. You have to tell everyone, I'm in a period of recovery for 4 weeks. Now, this is quite hard, people do, because this is burnout is a more subtle thing. It's not an illness as such. But I know no other way than this. And do you remember, did anyone know the Lemsip ads? I don't know if this dates people. The people are smiling there. You remember the LEMSIP now, because I'm so old. They used to have 2 sets of LEMSIP ads. Okay, they're just testing your memory here. In the old days, the LEMSIP, you know, your LEMSIP is when you're sick. I don't mean to advertise LEMSIP, but I have to tell the story. They had this elder lemon. So this guy gets sick, and the elder lemon comes to him. This is the ones from the old days when I was a child. The elder lemon told him to go to bed and recover and take a LEMSIP. You know, it was a period of convalescence, and they gave him the LEMSIP. In the 90s, it changed, the ads. This is actually true. So now the person's a bit sick, and he goes to the elder lemon, and he gives him a LEMSIP and says to him to get back to work because he has the LEMSIP. So he has to push through now. So to become at this point, he's not allowed to take convalescence or recovery. Just get out of the bloody bed and get going again. Take the LEMSIP. Now go back to school or whatever. So, but if you're in burnout, that's not possible. Okay, the old elder lemon was right from the 80s. So you need to plan a period of convalescence and recovery, and remove the demands of stress cause burnout as much as you can. So for your child, that could be school, you need to take a break from school or reduce it as much as possible, or whatever is causing that, and as much as you can. And if they're your own stress, but there's things that you can reduce the load on them and create a restful, recovering sensory environment. It's a bit like a hospital. They sit at home, they relax, you connect them to their enjoyable activities. They might give them their safe foods they love. You might let them bed rot, just sit in bed and relax. They're recovering. Binge on Netflix movies or whatever you do to recover. Now, parents say, "Oh, I can't do it. I can't do that." But if you're in burnout, this is just like the guy with a broken cat is sick. You have to plan a period of convalescence. You can agree this with your child. Let's do a nice period. We're going to help you recover. Okay, and you know their sensory system, what they need to do that. It might be a quiet environment. Do they need to talk to? Some people think, oh, well, they bring all their friends over to help them recover. That could be the wrong, because bring friends over could be stressful, and they need a period of pulling back, as a lot of people do, and minimal social interaction as they're recovering. They might need maybe going out and just sitting out in nature, just small little things. So you plan a period of recovery, for self-care, rest and relaxation, connecting to comforts and special interests, and reducing social demands if they're costly to your energy. Or this is the same recipe for you, by the way. There's a little bit extra challenges in doing it as a parent, as I'm sure you can appreciate. But it's doing as much as you can of these things to build recovery as much as you can. So let's look at parent burnout. The extra bits on that. Additionally to what you're planning with your child, you need to plan your own recovery if you're in burnout. And you can do that by seeking help and support. I'll just put all these. You need to say, I need a break. I've come to this point where I can't go on in the same way. I need to change. You need to advocate for yourself. It's better to do that before illness takes over and you can't physically do that, or you enter a mental breakdown where you can't manage at all, and you're so try to have it early and say, I'm planning this period of recovery for myself. Now, a lot of it's dependent on your what levels of support you have and who you can draw upon. I'm not, and you might have a lot of constraints. I'm not saying that this is easy, but if you're a lone parent, you think, well, what can I drop? How can I build this period of recovery for myself in the home with my children? Now that might be reducing as much of demands, getting off those committees, only inviting friends over who truly support you, finding one confidant rather than all those other people, social relationships that actually don't really help you. Picking one family member and really asking they need these certain things. Seeking out for professional help where you can, and in the community and so forth. Reducing expectations to a minimum so that you are recovering, and so forth. So doing as much as you can to build up your reserves and resources. And there are simple things you can do even as a parent, even when the children, even when you can't, because I remember I was working with a dad once who was very stressed out, like he was by parenting and work. And, he had the idea, well, I need to do more of my leisure to relax. So he was going to play squash. This was how long ago this is, when people played squash. And but then he went to squash and he was playing this like a lunatic. This wasn't really relaxing him, and he collapsed on the court, and in the squash. So he had to go home, and it was all a big medical emergency. So for him, it was about learning to find. It wasn't this big bringing stress into these activities he expected himself to do. It was about learning to reduce and find moments of interrupting stress and ways of relaxing in the moment. For example, and I was talking to, and this was in a group. We were just the parents were talking about all the things they could do to relax, and another parent said, "Well, all those things sound too stressful." He says, one parent said, which is lovely, said, "What I'm going to do, all I can do is if I get one cup of tea, sitting in the seat, one of my favorite tea. They loved a herbal tea, sitting, looking out in the garden. That's a good day." So planning these little moments of support and valuing them. They're often called glimmers. Can make a big difference, as opposed to triggers. Glimmers, it's a lovely term. You want to look it up. It's a new exploration psychology, looking for glimmers of hope, glimmers of relaxation, things that little moments that make the difference to you. And for example, there's always an opportunity to pause and say, like, for example, you might be sitting on the couch, ruminating, stressed, but you could get up, walk to the kitchen, have a drink of water, put on the radio, depends what you listen to, put on a bit of music, a bit of Radiohead maybe, and listen, and that will change your state. Look out the window, go for a walk, call a friend. So learning to interrupt and make your state and build your recovery. Like all the other things we mentioned before, build the things that connect and support you is your plan, and get as much support around you as possible. Focus with your relationship with children. I'm going to come back to them. This is the key thing, because quite often the number one stress when I'm working with parents for parents is usually the stress with their children that stresses them. And usually the stress with their children is they have a fighting with their children. They're trying to get their children to do things their children don't want to do, if you want to put it in a nutshell. Okay. And my normal advice is stop fighting to do those things and just enjoy your children and focus on the relationship. And easier said than done, but it's transformational. I'm going to come back to this as my final point. I worked with a mom who was hospitalized for depression. She all believed she was a bad parent. She had all these expectations, and I worked over a period of 12 weeks. And we started with playing with her child. We do bringing her child so she can enjoy and just watch her child and play and connect. These were small preschool child, and over the course she became much more enjoying connecting with her child and seeing that she was a good parent. She could do that and this, and it was the change of that relationship that was the pivotal, that feeling of confidence, enjoyment, and connection with her child over that lifted her depression in this way. So we'll just come back to that as a point. So keeping your battery charged. I'm going to do a little exercise with you now, and then we'll have a few more minutes with questions after that. So what I want you to do is in the chat, thinking about your child, what stresses or depletes their energy, and what replenishes and energizes them. So you can think one of your children, so you think, what is the stressful things for them? What depletes them, their battery? You can put it in the chat, you can put a little minus, a little dash beside the ones that are depleters, and then a little plus, if you can find it on your keyboard, for what replenishes and energizes them. So just have a little think. It's nice just to have a little flood of that in the chat about all the different things. So what stresses or depletes your child's energy with a little minus, and what replenishes and energizes them. Let me just take a little stop and just see what's coming in there. School, that's a surprise. Only joking. Homework, that's not a surprise. Talking about problems. Yeah, some children don't like talking about problems. Don't. You don't have to. Here's a little tip that I explore in the course. You don't have to talk about problems to solve them necessarily. And so forth. Music is a plus, lovely. Listening to music, God bless me. I would have never got through my adolescence without music, all the trauma, without Joy Division, U2, just to name a few. Leaving certain gaming, that's a negative. Socializing, that could be, people did mention where there's a negative or minus. Walks, lovely, walks. Silly games are a plus, lovely. Silliness is really important. I did, this is decades, a couple of, 15 years ago when I was developing a program, and this was mainly with ADHD children as it happened. And I asked them the question, what do they enjoy doing with their parent the most, their mom or dad, what they really enjoy playing with their parent. And I asked the parents the same question, what did their child really enjoy doing with them? The interesting thing, there was a difference between what the parents told me and what the children told me. The parents usually said, when I said, what is your child really enjoying doing with you? The parents usually said, wordy things. They wanted to impress me. They usually said jigsaws, educational, reading together, books, acting out Proust or Chekhov. We all love that. It's a thing we do. And when I asked the kids, they never told me those things. What was their number one thing they said they loved doing with their dad or mom? This was actually by a fair yard, the number one thing. What do you think it was? It was something around wrestling, silly games, rolling, horseplay, stuff like that. Rolling down a hill and so forth. Does that make sense? So, and that's the recommendation. If you want to take it away, go roll down a hill. Now, there's a lot in that in terms of, often the traditional things don't work. So I'm giving you permission to think about that. So looking about what depletes your children and what replenishes them. This is your key map to have in mind. Let me just go back to the chat. I'm going to ask you also then, let's do the second questions is, think of yourselves now. What depletes you as a parent? What depletes your battery? Put a minus in for that. And what replenishes you as a parent? And put a plus for that in the chat. Let's see what you come up with. There'll be a prize for the best one. The prize will be just, okay, work, just reading, people pleasing, very good, minus, good self-awareness, bedtime, constant interrupting, worry about my child not going to school again. These are all worries and expectations. Lots of children take breaks from school and still do great, have amazing outcomes. I was talking to a young man who didn't go to school for about four years, was a bright fella, couldn't just get into school. And then he joined to the National Learning Network through the rehab and is in college, did his Leaving Cert a different way, and is now successfully qualified in his 20s. Okay, so, he was autistic. There's pathways, you have to work with what you've got and the best you can. Watching Grey's Anatomy is a plus. Great, love the dating on that. Excellent. Crochet, nice one. Quite ND, I like it. So and so forth. So it's about understanding yourself and what you need to do. There's a big flood of them there. We won't go through them all. So I'm just trying to promote self-awareness is your key. So let me just go back to my overheads. I just want to make one final point, and then we can take some questions. So we did our exercise about keeping your battery charged. So I want to talk about the relationship battery. I talked about the importance of relationship. You could also think about your relationship with your child is a bit like a battery that you need to keep charged. You need to put energy into. You need to keep it alive, in the green. The bar is up. You don't want the battery to deplete. Because when your battery depletes, when your relationship battery depletes, then you get more aroused, more meltdowns, more upset, and it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't get any enjoyment, and your battery depletes more. So you have to keep it up in green, because if you're, and that's keeping all the enjoyable things, all the things there, the horseplay, the hugs, the kisses, the funny games with bubbles, the connections, the chats with teenagers, watching, binging on TV with them, finding playing video games with them, finding something that connects, and then get your battery up into green. And then it becomes reinforcing the battery, and it becomes easier, and your relationship improves. And then both your stress levels diminish, and you're less at risk of burnout. The most important thing in reducing burnout for children is the relationship with their parent. Their parent is a safe parent who loves them, is always with them, cares for them, always their advocate, always has a warm relationship. Okay, we've got all these problems. Okay, but we'll figure it out together. I'm on your side. We're still going to have fun together. And the most important thing to a parent's well-being and reduction of stress is their relationship with their child. So this is your uber super win-win. Okay, so that's your most important thing. So I'm going to move into a couple of questions and comments now, facilitated by Michelle. So just to give you some of what if you want to find more about my work. So my website, solutiontalk.ie for parents, and I've got hundreds of questions on that, and many on issue that we've been talking about today. I have an Instagram. You want to follow me on Instagram? I send around information that way. I have 2 courses that you might be interested in. I have one on parenting exceptional children, which is these ideas, but expanded over 3 weeks and longer workshops, and allowing for much more interactivity and following your own individual questions as well. I try to work very hard for parents with individual goals to help them meet those. And then I've also a workshop on supporting teenagers' well-being and self-esteem as well. So they're all on my website if you're interested in those things. The teenagers workshop is both for neurodistinct and neurotypical children. I'm hoping to get to a point, it's my mission, is that all the courses I do, we don't have to make a distinction. Embracing neurodiversity is good for everybody. It's good for neurotypical teenagers and children as well, to appreciate diversity, for them not to be locked into a rigid way of thinking, behaving. Everyone benefits. But we've a bit of work to do on that one. So let me I'm going to also copy in the chat there a link if you want there in the chat there. You should see oops, oh, hold on a minute here. So I've just copied a link for if you want the workshop slides and some extra articles. If you put your email in that little form there, I will send you those things by email. If you have time, please give me some feedback as well. There's a space to do that in that link there as well. So I'd be grateful if you take that, just take time to fill that in when you get a chance. Oh, can't get into the link. That's disappointing. Let me fix that. That doesn't sound good. Let me just check that as we're garnering the questions. I'll just check my link there. It seems to be working for me, so I'm not really sure. Maybe some people are finding it hard to get into it. Maybe I'll just copy it in live there. Okay, so that might be a bit easier. So Michelle,
Hello.
so maybe if we want to open for a couple of questions or so, I'd be
Yeah,
happy to do that.
there are loads of questions, and I've sort of trying to collate them into categories, and hopefully, what are you thinking, like 15 minutes, 20?
Maybe about 4 hours, maybe.
Because that's about how many questions we have.
No, let's go 10,
Okay, and
10,
so what
15 minutes.
I do want to say to everybody, because I am watching your questions, and I have taken the Parenting Exceptional Children course with John Sharry. So if you have questions and I don't get to them, because there's no chance we're going to get to all of them, I do highly recommend taking that course. I know a little bit about being neurodivergent because I am, and I have kids that are that way also, and still the course was really useful. And there's a lot of reassurance for parents in that. So I highly recommend doing that to get a little bit more one-to-one access to John. Um, so So school is what I approached you about in the first place. And so that's coming up here quite a lot. And so one of the questions, and I'm going to say they've come in that somebody was mentioning their child and another two people mentioned an adolescent. So maybe you can give a broad answer to this. But so you've got a kid that wants to go and just cannot get themselves out the door, or like a 17-year-old, two
Mhm.
17-year-old leaving cert students that really would like to do that, but just can't do it. So how, as a parent, can you approach that? Or what do you do in that case? Because the school says get them there no matter what, which
Mhm.
I think we all understand now is maybe not the best idea.
Um, well, that's great question, and there are a large group of children like that who do want to go to school, and they're neurodistinct and they have challenges there, but they know it's good for them. They want to achieve and so forth, but they find it difficult. Now, you'd have to tune into those children individually to know the reason for that, but it's very optimistic that they want to do it. Like I've worked with a number of children who they might have. Extreme anxiety about going. So they want to go, and then they approach the school, and then suddenly they're overwhelmed by anxiety and they can't go in or something. That could be something that could happen. Uh, um, and or it could be another reasons that they can't go in. They want to, or they can't motivate themselves in the morning to get up and go, or there could be a variety of different things. So it will be about really tuning in and building, trying to understand the reasons that's happening for the child. Now, I would do that in a co-problem solving way, that you would say, sit down with your child and let's figure this out together. Let's try to make a plan about how to do this. And let's look at what's going on and how can we help you manage your mind or anxiety, if that's the thing that's holding you back. How can we make this easy for you to get back to school? Now, the most common problem in these plans is it's made too hard for the child to achieve it. The goal is like get back 5 days a week and go in the same stress. So you're trying to look at ways of reducing the amount of stress and the problems to get back into school. And there's a number of different strategies. So you'd need to be working with the school around that as to how they could make it easier, what would make it the first step and easier for the child to get back in. Like reduced days, attending certain classes. One of the big blocks as well, that the most common, the number one reason why children find out to go back is they don't know what to say to their peers about why they're off. So creating a good story for that, a good viable story can help, and so forth. Recruiting peers involved in this. So it's very, very individual as to how you make a plan around that, depending on exactly what the issues are for the child, their motivation, what would make it easier for them, what would make the school a more supportive environment, what the school can offer, etc., etc., etc. So it's a very there's no one answer to that. Do you know what I mean? But try to get some support to help you coach together with yourself and your child and work through those steps to sort that out.
So I'm seeing a lot of people asking for the recording. So I just want to let you all know that you are all going to get it. So you're going to get a recording link after this, and it will go up into the Neurodiversity Ireland library also, and it will be hosted there. Now, I haven't asked John about the slides. So some of you are asking about slides. Are
Yeah,
you
so
willing to post them?
Give people the slides. I just copy in the link. I copy into the chat there. If they just click on that, click on link there, they can put their email in for the slides, and I'll send anyone who puts the link there. Some people are putting their email directly in the chat. If you can send those to me, Michelle, I will make sure everybody gets the slides who gives me their who either puts it via the link there. Just click on the link there, and um, and so forth. And some
Yeah,
people are
we have.
you can send to me from the chat if that's okay. Is that okay, Michelle?
Yeah,
And I'll
yeah,
send it to
yeah.
you.
And we have the ability on our library page to host the PowerPoint as well. So your talk
Okay.
will be there, but we can also have the slides up there as well. So we can send them individually too. So
Mhm.
that's great. So I'll share that chat with you after. So here's a parent asking, they're saying chronic headache, sore tummy, fatigue, doesn't want to leave the house. Is this burnout?
Um, so the chronic fatigue, headache. What was the other symptoms there, Michelle?
Doesn't want to leave the house, sore tummy.
Yeah, it could be. Sounds like it. Sounds like pretty much we're nearly there.
Yeah. It's really, that's a great awareness, the person that already asked that asked that question, because it seems like you already know that you're here, you know. So
Yeah, and particularly when you get physical symptoms, that's a real sign of burnout taking place. Like these, you might get like, physical symptoms, hurt, pain, um, other things, illnesses start occurring, um, and also, mental distress and anxiety. And they're all real signs of burnout taking hold, low energy and so forth. Yeah, you get
yeah,
these
I think
physical symptoms. Yeah.
Casey Ehrlich, who does a lot of work around PDA, says that it's if one of your basic needs is impacted, like toileting or
Mm.
eating, like my own child wasn't able to eat during burnout. So those are other, I think, things to be aware of. If there's something that you know that they're capable of and that they can't do it, that might be a burnout situation.
Yeah.
Um, so and then so there's a lot of people saying that schools are not supporting them, which is definitely part of what's
Mm.
going on. And I just to all the teachers out there, like we know that there are amazing teachers, and so we
Mhm.
really respect that. And also at the same time, there are some people that just don't get this, and the like it's drag them in kind of thing. So, one person's actually gotten her child to CAMS because they were threatening to end their life. I had a very similar situation myself. And people are saying things like, well, they don't really mean it, And I think in that situation, when you're on that precipice, it's kind of like, well, how do you know? It's a pretty
Mm.
scary moment if you have a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old saying that they don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, but even the fact they're saying it is a real cry for help and support. It's not relevant even whether they mean it, they're desperate for support. Um, Now it is very, very hard to get services, and people do have sometimes, unfortunately, poor experiences. I like, let's be honest, and there are also great professionals there as well who are much more on board and getting on board when understanding this. Like for example, uh, one of the mental health I worked with in the past, the Lucina Clinic, they tried to get ADHD support, affirmed by ADHD and by As I Am, and they produced a report saying they know that over 50% of the children attending